This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
On this channel, I often do really simple things in extraordinarily difficult or just odd ways. And so for this video, I've learned to tell time using nothing but the moon. And if you think that that might be a bad way to tell the time, it really is. But there is a good reason to learn to do it. But before we get to that, I need to tell you about the moon, the earth, and the sun. The ways we tell time all started with these three bodies. A day was the amount of time it took for the Earth to rotate once, which we see as the sun rising and setting. And a year was the amount of time it took for the Earth to orbit around the sun once. And then a month, which was called a month, it wasn't called a month, and a month was the amount of time that it took for the moon to go around the Earth once, though it has diverged quite a bit from that over the millennia. Fun fact, these are all actually to scale, except 34 million times smaller than they really are. And if we actually spaced them out to how they would need to be, these, the moon and the Earth, would need to be 10 meters apart, and they would need to be 4 kilometers away from the sun. I originally planned to do this entire video to scale, but that turned out to be a complete logistical nightmare, so this isn't going to be to scale at all. If you're just here to watch me struggle to try and tell time based on the moon, then you could just skip to wherever that arrow is in that part of the video. But if you want to actually learn to do it yourself, there's 3 things you need to consider. Number 1, at this time of year, how long will the moon be in the sky for? Number 2, based on where it is in the sky right now, how long has it been in the sky for so far today? And number 3, based on its current phase, what time did it rise? The first thing we need to consider is just where in the world are you? Because the Earth's axis is tilted. The reason we have seasons is because of this tilt, because we get different amounts of daylight depending on if the tilt is pointed towards the sun or away from it at different times in the year. Now, the further you are from the equator, the bigger that difference can be. In Vancouver here, we get about 16 hours of sunlight during the summer and only about 8 in the winter. The length of time that the moon is up in the sky for varies just as much as the sun does, but instead of taking all year, it goes through that cycle roughly once a month. But to keep things simple for this video, we're going to pretend that we are at the equator, where the moon is in the sky for about 12 hours every day. But just keep in mind that it isn't always that way. When the moon appears to be full to us, that's because it is on the opposite side of the Earth as the sun is. So in our example, it rises when the sun sets and sets when the sun rises, which means it rises at 6 p.m. and it's at its highest point at midnight and sets at 6 a.m. During a full moon, you can tell the time just as you would by looking at the sun and seeing how high it is in the sky, except you use the moon. But the reason that this whole thing is complicated is because the moon does not rise at the same time each day. It rises a little later each day, and that difference isn't consistent. But on average and at the equator, it rises 51 minutes later each day. Since it orbits around the Earth, the moon is not usually on the opposite side of the Earth as the sun is, which is why it's not usually a full moon. And that also means that it doesn't normally rise just as the sun is setting, but it rises a little later each day. Luckily, this corresponds to the moon's phases. So a full moon rises at 6 p.m., but a last quarter moon, like this, rises at midnight and sets at noon. And a new moon rises at the same time as the sun, which is why you can't see it. You're looking at its dark side. If you figure out what time the moon rose based on its phase, and if you consider its position in the sky to figure out how long it's been up, and as long as you've considered the latitude you are in, you should be able to tell the time. Okay, I have spent more time trying to figure out how to tell time by the moon than probably anyone ever should, and I was originally planning on testing myself in the middle of the night without knowing what time it was outside, but it has been cloudy and rainy for a month here, so I've found a website that has some photos, some images of the moon at different parts of the sky in different phases, and I'm going to try and guess the time without looking at what it actually says. So this is my test. And for this test, again, we're gonna keep things at the equator. Okay, first image it looks like it's halfway up in the sky. So that's easy. It's been up for 6 hours. Now, it's most of the way from a new moon to a full moon. So a new moon rises at 6 a.m., full moon rises at 6 p.m. It's most of the way through that. So we're going to say that it rose at 3 p.m. If it rose at 3 p.m. and it's been up for 6 hours, it should be 9 p.m., which is like spot on. This is good. We see the moon is setting in the west, so it's been up almost 12 hours. We'll say it's been up 11 and a half hours. Okay, it is most of the, well, it's halfway from a new moon to a full moon, which it would mean that, so a new moon is at 6 a.m., a full moon rises at 6 p.m., halfway between that should be noon. So it should have rose at noon and be almost setting. So it should be close, in this image, it should be close to midnight, it should be close to 12. And it is midnight. Okay, we're doing good. Okay. Now in this image here, the moon is no longer full. It is halfway back to being a new moon. So that means it rose. Okay, so first, one thing at a time. Looks like it rose about 3 hours ago. So it rose 3 hours ago. And based on its phase, it's halfway between a full moon and a new moon. So a full moon rises at 6 p.m., a new moon rises at 6 a.m. So it rose at midnight. It's 3 hours after that. It should be 3 a.m. And it's 3 a.m. Okay, so we are 3 for 3. This is great. Okay, if 3 out of 3 seems like too high of a score to be possible, I mean, it kind of is, because these images are the best case scenario. They're really simple. In these examples, it's only up for 12 hours precisely, and all of those images were rounded to the hour, so that's probably as good as it's going to get. But I really didn't do this project so that I could tell time by the moon. I mean, I have a watch. I did this because the moon is this mathematically predictable thing, except for me, and I think for most people, it seems entirely chaotic. Like, why is it in the sky some days and not in others? I wanted to actually feel connected to the solar system. I wanted to understand it, and this project has really achieved that for me. I've been getting a lot of comments lately from many of you on this recent video of mine about how you want to start making your own videos or start your own YouTube channel, but you can't yet because you don't have the right camera or the right equipment or the right backdrop or whatever. And I have to tell you that that's just a bad reason to not get started, because you just don't need any of that stuff. I actually bought my very first digital video camera after I won an award from something I filmed entirely on this laptop. This is really cool, but it's also very distracting. I want to tell you about a course called Creating Pro Video with Tools You Already Own. It's on Skillshare, which is the sponsor of this video. This course gets into the importance of storytelling and of making the most of what you already have. And it's the course that I wish I had back when I was just getting started, because I used to spend a lot of time worrying about details that didn't matter when I could have been putting that time into actually going out there and getting the work done and making stuff. This course covers a lot of the technical know-how that goes into making a video actually look good, but it also makes the entire thing really approachable, like it's something that you can actually do. And there's also 25,000 other courses on Skillshare, and the ones that I've seen are very entertaining and to the point. You can use the link in the description to get a free 2-month trial. And after that, it's just $10 a month, which is a lot of value for a tiny amount of cost. And I think it's a great place to get started. But either way, if you want to start making videos, please just go out and start making things. I wish you the best of luck.
and thank you for watching. Every time someone subscribes to this channel, a single drop of water from this machine falls onto one of these two plants, and that's really the only thing that's been keeping them alive.